I want to preface this by saying that you should take everything in this video with a grain of salt. I'm looking at this media through a language barrier with a very small English fanbase to go to for help. And that means it's impossible for me to research as thoroughly as I would with other theory videos. I can guarantee you right now there are plenty of nuances that I've missed on account of this. So, I have a very lazy but effective method of finding new music. I let YouTube do it for me. Whenever I'm working on something that doesn't require me to listen, I put on a mix that YouTube made for me. If I hear something annoying, I'll skip it, and if I hear something I really like, I'll add it to my playlist. Well, one day I was working on a video script, and I heard a song that was pretty good. I opened up the tab to put it on my playlist, and I saw that it was a cover of a Japanese song with an animated music video. I'm not normally a fan of anime and stuff like that, but something about this caught my interest. I decided to watch through it since I was getting bored of what I was working on anyway. And by the time I got to the end, I was both extremely impressed and extremely confused. I could tell there was a lot going on that I hadn't caught, so I decided to watch it a second time, and a third, and a fourth. And then I decided to look it up, and it turned out it was connected to another music video, which was connected to another, which was connected to another, and so on and so forth, all of which take place in an ambiguous order. Now, as I've said in other videos, I'm the kind of person that likes timelines, so imagine my delight when I discovered that these music videos actually tie together in a specific order, and that people in the community aren't sure what exactly that order is. How could I turn away from something like that? And now here I am, 3 months into watching these videos over and over and letting my brain piece them all together. So, at the risk of tarnishing the existing EVE English fanbase with my rotten ideas, I'm gonna share with you all my current EVE Universe timeline. For this video, I'm just gonna be covering about 50% or so of the overarching lore. That being the stuff that connects in any way to the two existing external stories, How to Eat Life and Empty Memories. There's a lot more stuff in the timeline that spans over 60 years of lore, but most of the stuff disconnected from these two stories are pretty much impossible to place in any sort of chronological order as of now. Also, that first story I mentioned, How to Eat Life, has only been translated up to book 2 of 5, so I can't promise that this timeline will be accurate to those 3 newest books. There aren't any summaries either, just scans of the few illustrations within the books, so I'm almost completely in the dark on those. On the off chance that anyone watching this video has read those books, feel free to let me know what happens in them so I can incorporate them in the future. Unfortunately, the very first thing in this timeline is those books I can't read. So there's gonna be a large gap between what I can explain from these books and the next item on the list after them. Sorry about that. So these How to Eat Life books tell the origin story of Toby, who's pretty much the overarching protagonist of the EVE universe. And they also give us a rough understanding of how this world functions. Around 2016-ish, Toby is on the run with his brother Seiki, and he's forced to hide in an abandoned building. His brother never comes back for him. Instead, this one-eyed guy called Hitotsume hands him a talking backpack named Baku, and then kinda just disappears. Nobody can see Baku but him, until a few years later when his classmate Ryuko reveals that she has something similar that she thought only she could see. Eventually the two learn that some people have magical creatures following them around called Zingai, which are essentially a supernatural entity made up of a part of your soul, or in Toby's words, your heart's other form. There's something strange going on though. Toby and Ryuko notice that a suspicious number of their classmates have Zingai that can't be seen by their own owners. And these Zingai keep tormenting people until they break mentally. Also, Toby starts eating these problematic Zingai and putting their owners into comas. Yeah, there's a lot going on here and it's hard to summarize. But long story short, these kids with rogue Zingai are actually victims of an app messing with their minds. And this app was commissioned by none other than Seiki, Toby's brother. That's where the second book ends. That cliffhanger is annoying, but it's a great segue into the next entry in the timeline, because it's actually a music video starring Seiki called Tokyo Ghetto. This is where we get our first confirmed date for this timeline. Camera footage shows that it takes place from June to November of 2020. It's a good thing Seiki's Zingai janitor has that face mask, I guess. This music video seems to take place in a city called the Tokyo Underground, which is populated primarily by Zingai. Seiki seems to be in a much more vulnerable place here, although it's not clear why. While he was confident and cunning in the novels, he seems weak and afraid here. His Zingai janitor, who used to be a sidekick, is more like a looming threat now, and the lyrics suggest Seiki struggling to find a reason to even keep living. He was clearly a bad dude in the novel, so I would guess that one way or another his crimes are catching up with him. In the end, it seems like Seiki loses his will and Janitor eats him, an inversion of his little brother who's essentially become addicted to eating Zingai. And speaking of his little brother, there's a music video starring him that takes place immediately after Tokyo Ghetto. This one is called How to Eat Life, and it's what inspired the novels of the same name. The music video starts with a shot of Seiki's remains, and it seems that now that his big brother is gone, Toby has dedicated his life to searching for Hitotsume, the one who gave him his Zingai Baku all those years ago. Why he's doing this is unclear, although it probably implies Hitotsume and Seiki had some sort of partnership. So it seems like at this point, Toby and Baku are kinda stuck in a cycle of eating each other to stay satisfied, until a giant Zingai dragon starts wreaking havoc on the city, and they work together to eat that instead, which I imagine kept them satisfied for a while. After that, we're back to the world of literature with Empty Memories, a manga that's been releasing chapters since 2020. Honestly, not much really happens here. It's kinda just a string of fight scenes and info dumps about things I already explained. Although, it does tell us about a place called the Heart Stratum world where Zingai come from. It's like a parallel universe where each person's Zingai lives unless some event, usually a traumatic one, pulls them to the normal world to be with their host. I originally thought this was the same thing as the Tokyo Underground, but what little I can find about the later How to Eat Life books implies they're separate, so for the time being, I'll assume they're two different things. In the beginning of the manga, Toby is looking for Hitotsume again, but he immediately gets sidetracked helping this kid Ray who's become the target of another, more sinister Zingai eater. I won't dwell on it, but if you want to really dig deep into the way this world functions, then I'd give it a read, because it goes in depth to a fault. The next music video, which takes place either during or shortly after Empty Memories, is literary nonsense. The reason I place it here is because we see a near exact copy of a scene from the beginning of this music video in the middle of the manga, implying that the music video is either about to happen or is currently happening at that point. So it turns out that while Toby was distracted with the Rei situation, Hitotsume was actually close by, screwing around with this kid named Bun. Bun seems to be stuck with an overly rational perspective on life, as he has trouble processing his emotions, preferring instead to bottle them up. Hitotsume decides that he needs to help with that, and his method of helping is to rip out Bun's guts, shove them into his head, and let him come undone. Yeah, this guy may or may not have good intentions, but he's bad news either way. It's probably for the best that Toby can't find the guy again. It's certainly not the last we see of Hitotsume though, as he's a major player in the next music video in our timeline. This one is called Dramaturgy, named after the sociological theory that we're all actors putting on different masks depending on who we interact with. Throughout other music videos, there have been hints towards a fugitive named Kurukuru, and here we finally get to see his story. It seems like he's having issues with his sense of self, hence the name Dramaturgy, and he's found by Hitotsume at his lowest point. Kurukuru says that, in the face of those who are about to give up all hope, you always make your appearance as if mocking them. Seems a bit harsh for someone who's seemingly trying to help, until you notice that in the background, you can see shots of what he turned Bun into. So, I can't help but think Kurukuru is aware of that situation. The reason for Kurukuru's identity issues might be because of the isolation that comes alongside being a fugitive. It sounds like his problems stem from not having anyone to perform for. As he says, everyone desperately play your parts while the audience seats are empty. And I can't remember a single role I was suited for. In addition to showing us Kurukuru's philosophy, I feel like this music video is the most important one for understanding Hitotsume's philosophy and what's driving him to do the things that he does. Kurukuru is trying to find his real self buried beneath the performances he puts on for people, and I think Hitotsume doesn't believe in the concept of a real self. He's referred to as the man behind the curtain or the mastermind, depending on which official translation you look at. And in a non-canon music video that was made for a concert film, he's depicted as a camera-like entity who tries to push societal norms onto the protagonist, which lines up with gestures he makes in this one, and the camera imagery in Literary Nonsense. Speaking of literary nonsense, there's a segment of that song that I think is sung by Hitotsume, since there's a change of voice and it's in quotations. There is no real me. There's nothing like me or not like me. You and you all seem so interested in me, and surely you have your own opinions, but they're all wrong. For there is no answer, you see. While Hitotsume is clearly a menace, he might have a point this time, because in the end, Kurukuru is torn apart in his quest to find himself, and meets a fate similar to Bun. I guess really there's no winning. This next placement is a big stretch, but also it doesn't connect to any other music videos, so if I'm wrong, then it doesn't actually matter. At the end of the music video, Night is Faint. We see papers on the wall showing the protagonists of How to Eat Life, Empty Memories, Literary Nonsense, and Dramaturgy. So I figured I'd place it right after the last one in that list, hence me talking about it immediately after Dramaturgy. This music video is interesting in that it's the first time we see someone with two zingai. It follows Akame, a boy being medicated for presumably depression, who's temporarily convinced to drown himself by his villainous zingai Kumo, but saved at the last second by his friendly zingai Zukin, who helps him erase Kumo's influence. It's a pretty fun one despite the subject matter. After that, we follow the adventure of another boy who's been shown to have ties to Bun, just like Kurukuru. This Crocs-wearing kid is Patoon, and he's the star of the music video Outsider. I actually had trouble placing this one in the timeline. There's a poster for a show being held by Kurukuru, which should imply that it's before everything else, as Kurukuru was wanted as early as How to Eat Life. But one of the characters here, Mochi, goes through a transformation, and that transformation hasn't happened yet in How to Eat Life or Empty Memories. The poster also has the date October 3rd, 2023, which is before the one we'll be talking about shortly after this. So, I'm gonna say that Dramaturgy is on October 3rd, 2023, and this is just an old poster. I honestly have a hard time understanding what's going on in this particular music video, no matter how many times I watch it, and how many explanations I seek out. There's this group of zingai that's removing this colored stuff from all the other zingai, and they're putting it into a giant brain. And the brain seems to be connected to this giant dinosaur zingai named Itagon by tubes. and Platoon destroys the tubes and frees the color stuff from the brain, and there's like some robot guys or something. That's about all I can get out of this one. We've seen Platoon in the background a lot before, showing up several times in Empty Memories and once in How to Eat Life, so I feel like this music video should be particularly important, but I don't think there's enough context to say how exactly yet. The robot stuff might tie to Toby's brother Seiki, given the dancing mannequins and the scattered parts in Tokyo Ghetto. Speaking of people related to Toby, this next entry is about a recently made friend of his, Tsuneo Fuchi, who refuses to answer Toby's calls. This is probably the darkest of all the music videos, but it's the one that introduced me to this whole thing, so it's special to me. It also has a particularly concrete story, so I get to go really in-depth with this one. When Fuchi was a little boy, his father would lash out at him and pour scalding hot water all over his body, and his Zingai, Mr. Creepypasta, retaliated by killing the dad and staging it as a suicide. Fuchi lives with this trauma for years until March 28th, 2024, the day before his 18th birthday. Sorry to break the flow, but I just wanted to say real quick that I'm really glad to get another exact date. Fuchi tries to go out the same way as his dad was falsely believed to, but thankfully he fails. Fuchi is also an insomniac, hence the title, and when he gets too sleep-deprived, he regresses back to his childhood self. This particular night, Mr. Creepypasta decides to be an absolute psychopath and give Kid Fuchi a model gun and lead him out into the street to pretend to shoot people. Not only that, he also drives a truck into traffic and causes a several-car pileup. The next morning, on his birthday, now adult Fuchi sees the event on the news, and he doesn't even realize he's the one who did it until the police show up at the door. He fights with his kid self, ironically getting into a car accident in the process, until he comes to accept his past, at which point he embraces his kid self and takes Mr. Creepypasta's place as the one Kid Fuchi can trust. The two of them disavow Mr. Creepypasta, and they're taken to a hospital, and because they caused a public disturbance and traffic accident and are now a legal adult, they eventually end up in prison. Thankfully, Toby is still there for him though, which is nice. Things become a lot less heavy after that, as we're back to Toby with the next entry, which is a series of 4-panel comics creatively titled Toby and Ryuko. Confusingly, this is seemingly not the same Ryuko that Toby was friends with in the How to Eat Life novels. That one is just kinda gone for some reason. Maybe she dies in one of the later books, or maybe she's just irrelevant after the books. Remember that giant dragon Zingai that Toby ate? Well, this new Ryuko is actually a reincarnation of that Zingai. It turns out she was some kind of human Zingai hybrid or something that got assassinated by her fellow fight ring leaders, and now she's turned into a little girl. When Toby finds her in that alley all alone after eating her previous incarnation, he's reminded of the day he was left behind by his big brother, and how Baku was there for him. So, he decides to take her in and be her big brother. The comic strips just show their daily life together while Toby isn't off doing his job eating corrupted Zingai. We also get some Fuchi cameos, which is nice. He's out of prison and seems to be doing marginally better. Mr. Creepypasta is still following him around, but he doesn't seem to be causing trouble for Fuchi anymore. And we get to see Monica, a side character from How to Eat Life and Empty Memories, who I never brought up because she's never really all that relevant. As for Ryuko, she isn't exactly on the same page as Toby quite yet. At this point, she sees him and Baku as servants and Fuchi as a pet. Eventually, after a while of living together, Toby decides that Ryuko is old enough to join him on his search for Hitotsume in the underground. Or maybe he just couldn't find anyone to watch her. Either way, it's a big mistake. Remember how I said Ryuko's previous incarnation was murdered by her fellow fight ring leaders? Well, in this next music video, Fight Song, they're back. Well, Mr. Creepypasta was already in her general vicinity for a while, but I guess he didn't recognize her or just didn't care or something. But anyway, they kidnap her and force her back into her old position, which she goes along with until she sees that Toby has been forced into the fight ring. She's reminded of how he was there for her when she was all alone, and she decides to rescue him. Together, they defeat the leaders of the organization and go back home. I'd like to think that from this point on she sees him as the big brother he wants to be, but I don't know if that's actually the case or not. The music video features several single-frame cameos, but I've decided to disregard them, both because they make no sense, and because they also include characters from the anime Chainsaw Man, which obviously isn't in the same universe as these music videos. For the time being, that's the last we see of Toby. He seems content with Ryuko, so his arc is probably just about over anyway, but I do wonder if he'll ever see Hitotsume again. After those few lore bombs, we finally have a really simple one again, Demon Dance Tokyo. This one is most likely during the summer after Outsider, which was in late 2023, as Idagon is roaming free and it looks like summer weather outside. This music video is about an unnamed boy who I'll just call Demon. He had a cameo in Literary Nonsense, so he seems to be yet another acquaintance of Bun's. That guy sure had a lot of friends. Demon is seemingly part Zingai, and he feels like an outcast among his two friends, preferring to hide behind the camera. Throughout the music video, though, he slowly comes out of his shell and finds a place among them. This was the first music video to be made by Eve, so it makes sense that it's simplistic compared to the rest. Around the same time as Demon Dance Tokyo, we have Last Dance, which was a massive help with this timeline. It actually gave us an order for 5 of the music videos: Literary Nonsense, Dramaturgy, Outsider, Demon Dance Tokyo. I think the scribbled out person is Demon, given the similar shirt, the fact he calls himself a disappearing boy, and the fact that his music video is the only one removed from Eve's music video playlist. And then finally Last Dance. And I know this is specifically the timeline order, because it's noticeably not the order the music videos were made. Demon Dance Tokyo was the first one, and it's placed 4th here. Anyway, this one is about a dancer named, fittingly, Dancer. He seems to have ties to several prior characters. The subtitles call out that he repeats lines from Bun and Platoon, and we see footage from their music videos as well as Kurukuru's. He also seems to have a hole in his heart that's associated with Hitotsume, which leads me to believe he's probably been heavily scarred by what happened to Bun and Kurukuru. That might even be why he's in the hospital. This is also backed up by lyrics from Dancer at the beginning of the video. Everything I want granted has been taken away, leaving me distorted. With different values, that guy who I hate put on a ridiculous sneer. Deceived by elegant words, they waited, panicked and struggled, racking their brains and grasping onto greed. They fell into the abyss of ego. Ridiculous sneer sounds a lot like how Kurukuru described Hitotsume, and the others being talked about would likely be Bun and Kurukuru, who were manipulated by Hitotsume while panicking and struggling, trying to grasp onto a certain version of themselves, hence them falling into the abyss of ego. It seems like Dancer was also a fugitive like Kurukuru and Seiki at one point, as he's grouped together with the two of them in a tweet with the caption, "Exile from the capital, poor children." I'm not sure how that fits into anything, but I figured it was worth mentioning. Anyway, there are 2 different singers in this one, according to the pronouns used in the Japanese lyrics, or something like that, I don't know the specifics. The second singer seems to be Dancer's dancing partner, Mika-san, who wants him to join her again. Throughout the music video, it seems like the two of them are slowly coming to terms with the fact that Dancer doesn't find joy in it anymore and wants to move on. A line that comes from Mika-san, according to various translations, says, "When I looked from afar, you looked happy, but it hurts and hurts because I know everything." Thankfully, it looks like they're still able to remain on good terms by the end. With one exception, that seems to be the end of what I call the Hitotsume arc. Hence the song ending with the line, "And so we became anecdotes of our own, the stories that no one knew about, I'll tell you right now," which is accompanied by imagery of Hitotsume handing down a book. Now that arc is over and... Okay, so I'm literally shoving this in at the last second here, so sorry for breaking the flow. As I was making this video, a new music video about Fuji called Sayonara End Roll dropped, and I'm placing it right here in the timeline. Toby is 18, so it takes place after Fight Song where he's 17. And it takes place on Christmas, so it would be a while after Demon Dance Tokyo where it seems to be summer. Oh, also we got new concept art revealing Toby turned 18 in May, which would put both Toby and Ryuko and Insomnia in April, since they're after March but when Toby is still 17. In this music video, Toby comes across Fuji outside his apartment on Christmas Eve, so he decides to help Fuji clean up his space and invites him over for dinner. After Fuji returns home, he feels like he's just been a burden to Toby all day, and just in general. And he thinks that they're not close enough friends for him to be honest about how he's struggling. Also, at one point Toby gets annoyed and reaches out to take Fuji's phone, but he flinches and covers his facial burn, and we can hear the sound of scalding water for a second, which implies he still has flashbacks to his abuse. He can't take living like this anymore, so he walks into the ocean in another attempt to, well, you know. But by some Christmas miracle, Toby notices and is able to save him. Seeing that someone genuinely wants him around encourages him to keep on living another day. Okay, now that arc is over, and we enter what's essentially an interlude between that and what I call the Apocalypse arc. Yeah, things get pretty crazy eventually, but right now, we get to just enjoy these one-off adventures with little hints of what's to come sprinkled in. The first one, As You Like It, is about an unnamed boy with a Zingai named Handman. Handman represents an older, more confident version of the boy, so I'll just refer to the boy as Handboy. Handboy is a singer with a crush on his also unnamed friend. He tries to come up with his own ways of getting her to notice him, but eventually he decides to let Handman take over. Unfortunately, this just leads to the girl getting together with him. After that, Handboy decides to just be confident in himself instead of pretending to be his idealized self, and the girl seems to be happy with that. One thing of note is that there are several depictions of rockets and explosions in As You Like It, one of which is seen again from a different angle in this next music video, Bam Kitchen End. This one is incredibly similar to the last one. An unnamed boy is trying to get the attention of an unnamed girl, but he's too insecure, so he goes to a group of Zingai for help. This time, though, the Zingai are actually helpful. Also, the girl's Zingai destroys a section of the city. And no, that never gets addressed again. Hopefully there weren't too many casualties, although I fear this may have been one of the triggers for something down the line. The third and final entry in this interlude is Don't Replay the Boredom. I kept going back and forth on where to place this one because of all the references to other music videos we see on the TV. We're shown clips of the protagonists of the music videos for Dramaturgy, Last Dance, and Tokyo Ghetto in much better places than they were when we last saw them. Most noticeably, Seiki is alive. However, lines from the song itself make me think these are past events we're seeing, and things are no longer this way. Every night I think of those memories. In the end, it's an anniversary. There's also a scene of Handboy and Handman getting along, while the protagonist is playing a game of the two of them fighting, something that would have happened in the past when they had opposing views. Also, the green Zingai from Tokyo Ghetto is here, and they seem to have literally moved up in the world. Speaking of Tokyo Ghetto, this music video has a suspicious amount of ties to it. Janitor shows up several times, and the protagonist has both an eye that looks like Janitor's and robotic innards on one side of their face that are reminiscent of the mannequins from Seiki's home. I suspect this is showing us one of the many people who were screwed over by Seiki before his death, and how they're dealing with life now that he's gone. It seems like they've become addicted to watching television as a form of escapism, until their Apple-themed Zingai consumes them. However, an unnamed girl snaps them out of it, and they cough up the Zingai. It's a little confusing though, because I thought the green thing was the protagonist's Zingai, but maybe they're just roommates. Or maybe the protagonist somehow has two Zingai. That's not completely unheard of after all. Now, in every music video moving forward, we see a drastic change in scenery in what a few different scenes lead me to believe is the Heart Stratum world, despite the large number of human residents. I'm still trying to figure out how these all tie together and what's even happening in a lot of them, so I'm gonna have to save placing these into the timeline for a later date, but I will at least provide a quick list of the songs that are generally in this time period. We're Still Underground, This World to You, Shinkai, Living Idly and Dying as If Dreaming, Gunjo Sanka, this one is in 2081 specifically, Bokurano, and Flower Storm. I will dig deeper into that first one though, just to explain why I think this apocalypse arc even exists instead of leaving you all with a cliffhanger. The music video for We're Still Underground is perfect for setting up the premise of this arc. We see a boy in what I'm pretty sure is the Heart Stratum world, and the buildings are all destroyed and overgrown with wildlife. There's a sign saying war is over at one point, which makes me think that this world has been through a horrible war that left it in this apocalyptic state. This would probably be the reason for the various rockets and explosions throughout the previous few videos. We also see a girl taking the same route as the boy, and eventually hopping a fence and entering the Heart Stratum world. This is similar to a situation we've seen once before, in Tokyo Ghetto. Seiki was portrayed as crossing a fence and finding himself in the Tokyo Underground, but unlike there, this time it's just symbolic though, as we were shown in Empty Memories that the passageway to the Heart Stratum world is through your dreams, and this clearly isn't the Tokyo Underground given that, like I said, we see the exact same spots in two separate worlds. Anyway, the girl helps the boy escape his rogue Zingai, and then we cut to the future where he's found his way to the normal world. There's also a direct sequel to this one called This World to You, where we see the boy and girl reflecting on their worlds. First showing the Heart Stratum world, and then the normal world. It kinda gives off epilogue vibes, and although I don't think it's the final piece of the entire timeline, I think it's a good capstone for this video. Alright, now that we're done for the time being, let's look at what we've got. The How to Eat Life novels, Tokyo Ghetto, and the How to Eat Life music video are all in 2020. Empty Memories and Literary Nonsense are probably around 2022-ish, give or take a year. Dramaturgy and Outsider are in 2023. Insomnia through Sayonara Endroll are in 2024. And everything after that is in 2025 and beyond. So, yeah, that was a lot. Hopefully I explained things well enough for you all to get the general idea at least. And maybe even for some of you to dig into it all yourself. There aren't a lot of English-speaking people doing so, but maybe that could change. It would be great to get to see other people's ideas. Don't get me wrong, the couple of existing channels doing this are great. I've got to give a massive shout out to Eve Explained for making a ton of connections I never would have on my own. And one last note, if you do decide to look into Eve lore, please don't infect it with Five Nights at Freddy's brain rot. I know that's what most of my viewers are into, And it would kill me if I cause an unrelated fandom to be overrun with theories like Toby Bot or Shatter Bun or anything like that.